Morning, guys. Just a reminder, make sure you go ahead and comment your presence here in the Google Classroom on the same video post, similar to what we did yesterday, Tuesday. Make sure to comment present on the video post given for today. Alright, well, we'll just get right into it. I think some people are not present. Well, they'll just have to go ahead and watch the video from the beginning, okay? So last class we did something we already did before. We did a program in QBasic calculating the area of a circle. So if I bring up assignment from day 2, this is pretty much it. I expect that most of you already submitted. If you haven't, just make sure you find time to submit it. So this is what you should have for your assignment from Tuesday, day 2. For today, we're gonna move ahead, and instead of doing the area of a circle, we're going to jump back into doing a program that calculates or performs certain tasks based on conditions. When we're using conditions in our programs, we use the if-else structure. If, else if, and then finally else if we're covering anything else that did not meet the requirements on the previous conditions. And so this is what we're gonna do today. We're going to do the program. I think we did this already, to basically make a calculator, and we're gonna ask the user to choose what operation they want to do, and based on their choice we're going to calculate basic operations, in this case addition and subtraction, on two numbers that we'll ask the user to provide. If you use different arrows for your assignment, that's okay, as long as the flowchart looks presentable and has some kind of logical order, that's fine. So I want you to write this program out when you're doing your assignment. I began already because just to minimize on the usage of time. So basically from lines 1 to 4 is telling you what the program does. From line 1 it tells you this program calculates two numbers, basically two numbers that the user will provide. Line 2 asks the user to enter or to select their operation by entering 1 for addition and entering 2 for subtraction. So for, again, time purposes, we're only going to do addition and subtraction. As well, for your assignment, just do addition and subtraction as well, just to minimize the amount of work you guys need to do as well. Understand you have other classwork to do, so we won't do multiplication and division. Maybe we'll do that when we get back to class and we have more face-to-face time. So for today, we're just going to focus on addition and subtraction. On line 5, we ask the user to enter their choice. And on line 7, I put space here just to separate the prints or the outputs from the input operation here. The assignment for today is simply to copy this code, write it out in QBasic, make sure it runs. This code is not finished yet. I only half finished with it. I started ahead again just for the sake of time. So in line 7, we ask the people for their choice. So from lines 1 to 5 are all outputs. It's all messages that will be displayed. But it is until we reach line 7 that we actually wait for the user to enter the number for their operation. And that's why number 7's keyword here is to input. We are waiting for the user to input a value to be stored in the word operation. Now from line 9 to 15, it's an if-else or else-if structure combination. For the first part of this program, you've not seen this before, but this is something that I'm using to check that, yes, to do the program and the flowchart, Vincent. For this program, instead of going and asking for two numbers, even though the user might enter a wrong operation, for example, if they put 3 but we don't have an option for 3, or if they put -1 or 0, which we don't have an option for. Lines 9 to 15 checks for that. So my first if condition on line 9 says, if operation, and we'll reference the number that will be stored here when the user enters it, if operation is greater than 2, meaning it's either 3 or above, right? Then that means you're already outside the scope or the range for the operations that we allow for. So if the operation that they entered is 3 or above or greater than 2, then we print out invalid option and we just end the program. This keyword is new for QBasic, but all it does is end the program right here and now. Wherever this line is seen, it just ends it right there. No reason to continue with the program if the operation is invalid, right guys? So in the else if, it checks, well, if operation is not greater than 2, then we check else if operation then is less than 1. And in this case, anything less than 1 would be 0 or any negative number, right? And again, that's outside of the range that we allow for. We basically just allow for 1 or 2. So we check an entire range that any number that's greater than 2 and any number that's less than 1 is not within this allowable range. Therefore, we just print out invalid option and we end the program right there. So if I put now after those checks, and now I ask the user to please enter the first value, and I put input, and I will save this value as capital V value and 1. If I run this and then I put a number that's out of our range, for example -25, and I press enter, it just prints out invalid option because it's captured under this condition here. Operation less than 1, yes, -25 is less than 1. Therefore, we print out invalid option, which you see here, and then the program just ends. Notice it does not go over to this line and ask for the first value, because we don't need to ask for the first value if the operation is already not possible, right? So if I do enter a possible choice of 1, which is allowed, now it tells me to enter the first value. Of course, once I enter the value, nothing else happens because I haven't programmed anything else to happen, right? So let's go ahead and finish this program by asking the user to enter the second value, and then we put the command for the user to actually enter the value to be stored in a variable called value2. So we have two values here, and they're named after value 1 and value 2. Those are the names given to the variables which contain the two values that the user will enter. And then we go ahead now and program another if, but this time not to check for ranges that are outside the possible selections, but for the range that is the actual selection, so that we can perform the actual operation that we say is going to happen. So if operation equals 1, then, and then one thing to note is that once you hit, that's a good question, Vincent. Probably have to press space 3 times or 4 times. So if operation is equals to 1, one thing to note is that because the program was allowed to pass this point here from 9 to 15, you're pretty much guaranteed that once it hits line 16 and below, operation is definitely either 1 or 2 at this point, right? Because we've already made the necessary checks that confirms that it's not anything above 2 or less than 1. So once it reaches 22, you're pretty much guaranteed that it's either 1 or 2. So we'll check if operation equals to 1, then we print out the answer. So the sum is, and because we said that 1 is for addition, we will just go ahead and add value 1 plus value 2. Alright, and then we just continue on. Else, we don't even need to check for an else if here, because else ifs are only if you want to check something specific, like another condition, in this case like a comparison. So you could have did else if operation equals 2, then you pretty much print out the same message, except you change the words to account for subtraction instead of summation. So you put minus, and it's not a sum anymore, it's a difference. So we could have went ahead and just put else if to do another specific comparison, but remember what I said. Once it hits below this line here, below line 15, we're pretty sure it's either a 1 or a 2 or a 2, because we've confirmed that it's only going to be those two values. So what you could do here is actually just put else. When we hit else, it's kind of like your final all consideration. If it's not this in terms of a comparison, and if it's not something else, well then for whatever case, just do this. So else is kind of like your base case. It's what you hit when you're not sure what the value can be or what range else can be covered, so you just say else, and that's kind of like your base case. It's what's going to be hit regardless. As long as the first conditions are not met, the else block will just basically run either way. So in this case, we've confirmed already, due to these checks here, that it's going to only be 1 or 2 that's going to be allowed within continuing the program. So we check here, if operation is 1, we know that that's for summation. And then we already know that the only other possible value that operation can be at this point is 2, so we can just say else, because if it's not 1, then it's has to be 2, but that's only if you know for a fact that you've already confirmed a check beforehand. If you did not have this check here, the else would probably be used to say invalid option instead of this, because if this did not exist, then this code will run even if the operation is not valid. So we want to put an else here that says if operation isn't 1, and then we put else if operation is equals to 2, then we do difference, and then because we don't have a check anymore above, we can put else, and then we can put print invalid option, and then basically this is where the program would end either way, ending the end if. So even after this finishes, it will end here anyways, so I don't need to put an end like the past check. So in this case, we don't have a previous check, so we have to do it like this. If operation is 1, then we definitely do the addition. If operation is 2, then we definitely do the subtraction. But what if the operation isn't 1 or 2? Well, in that case, we have a base case, and we'll just put invalid option and not print an answer, because at this point, if they had entered, like for example, -65, I'll put the first value and the second value, and it tells me invalid option. So else isn't, well, if you think about it, kind of like, yes, else is kind of like cancelling out the other two options in the case that these options were not met. If operation is not 1, which in my case 65, -65 is not 1, so this will never be, it will never come into this block here. It's going to jump and see, well, if, let's check, else if operation equals 2 is going to make the check and say, is operation equals 2? And it'll be like, no, operation is definitely not 2. So, well, there's nothing else to check, so the last thing that we hit is the else. So then we're just gonna print out invalid option, because the programmer didn't program anything for 65 or -65 for that matter. So we're just going to print invalid option, and then there's no print that says the difference or the sum found in this block here, so it just ends there. So that's why right here it just prints invalid option. Now for us, we removed the check, and that's why we had to waste our time and enter the first value and the second value, right? And doing that kind of waste time, so I'm going to do a little Control Z and undo back to where I deleted the first check. So alright, so this is what we had before. Now if I run this, I won't need to enter any numbers if I've input a wrong operation, because we already checked for that here, and because we have the word end within the block, it's going to end right there, and it isn't going to waste the user's time, because if it's a wrong operation, why should we have to enter numbers? The numbers aren't going to be calculated anyways. Had a missing if there. So now if I put -65 and I press enter, it's just gonna say invalid option, and it just ends the program there, right? Don't waste any time, end the program. It's not like you can do anything with the numbers given to you anyways. Alright, so if I put 9, which again is not a valid option, and so forth and so forth, basically it's just going to stop once it hits these two checks. It accounts for any number that's greater than 2, which we've tested already, and it accounts for any number less than 1, which we've already tested out already. Now if I put 2, now it asks me for the second number. Now I can put, alright, 9. Now I want to do 9 minus 15. Enter, and of course it gives you a negative value because 9 is lesser than 15. So it does the calculation. Alright, so this is the program that I want you guys to copy it, type it out, do it on QBasic. Make sure it runs just like my one. Pause the video right here if you just want to just write this down on QBasic, right? And this is part 1 of the assignment. As usual, what I want you to do now is to do the flow chart. Let me take a quick check on time. All right, we're at 16 minutes. So in this case, for the flow chart, I'll just do it real quick just so you can kind of do the same thing when you're at home. So alright, I'm gonna close this one. So straight into the flow chart, we'll begin with start. And then I'm just going to do the shape, guys, just for time. I'm just gonna jump straight into the shapes. Here we go. So I think something's wrong with your code, Vincent, because it shouldn't say an error just because of tabbing. Remember, white spaces and tabs are not read by programs. It's just skipped over. Unless you put them between a variable's name, then it's gonna read it, right? So just check for that. Yeah, if you have a sheet of paper, if you can't do this on QBasic, then write it out, or yeah, just write it out, copy it down, and then do the flow chart for me. Okay, so we start with all these prints. So for simplicity's sake, because again I don't want to make this video run too far ahead, I'll put print and then this program dot 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 and that there, and then what we're gonna do is copy basically all the shapes that we need. Let me look at this. This one says 1 2 3 4 5, so we need 5 of these shapes. So 1 2 3 4 5. Alright, I'll let you guys handle changing the text for me, but again I just want to show you more or less what this flowchart will look like. Then 6 for the input, so this one would be input. So I'm just gonna put input just to put a distinction there, and then we hit an if else check, right? So this flowchart is gonna be fairly large, all right? So you might need an entire page for it, or maybe just for simplicity again, I'll let you guys combine all of these 5 lines into one shape. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna delete these. So for simplicity again and again, I don't want to give you guys too big of a flow chart. We're just going to put print, and then I won't put quotes, I'll just put a description, prompt for user instruction. Let me make this bigger. Alright, so we're kind of doing a little hack here, 5 lines worth. Alright, so we're gonna make this one shape basically cover these 5 lines up here. It's not correct by any means, but we as a class understand what we're doing, and it's all in the purpose of saving time. So we'll keep the input because the input is different in terms of what it does. Right, so let me show you the if else if structure real quick. So we'll insert a shape for a condition. In this case, a decision is a triangle, or not, sorry, not a triangle, a diamond. And what we check here is operation greater than 2. Is it greater than 2 or less than 1 first? Yeah, it's greater than 2. So based on this, if it was true, so let me give you guys a quick view of how this is gonna look. So when you're putting the arrow from here to here, let's see, that's not gonna work. Is it going to work? Let's see. Alright, I guess you just have to put the text here. That's false. So we'll print out a message. What do we say in this case? It's supposed to be true. If it's true that the operation is greater than 2, again refer to the code, then we print out invalid option and we end the program. So we print invalid option, and then we basically put an end right here. Right? So an arrow will go from up here to down here, and else we account for the next one. Is operations greater than 2? Let's say false. No, operation is not greater than 2. Then we go ahead and actually make this copy right here, because it basically it does another comparison. So if it's not greater than 2, we jump into the else if comparison, right? So it's a diamond to a diamond being happening there. But this time it's not operations greater than 2 but less than 1. And basically the same thing happens here. Copy this arrow here, and then we'll take this and copy that here. And in this case, if operation is less than 1, that means it's an invalid option, and again we end down here. Now if operation is not less than 1, right, that means we continue with our program by asking for the first and second value. So if any of these cases were true, we end the program, because if operation is greater than 2, that's not a valid operation, right? If operation is less than 1, it's also not a valid operation. Just draw the arrows, use the arrows out, type in the text. So if it's false, then basically you just go ahead, right click and copy those shapes and repurpose them. Then we print, enter value 1, and then basically you go write these 4 shapes, draw these 4 shapes, and then you finally finish off with this. Alright, so for assignment, I'll leave this last part for you to finish on your own. You can use this for your start. I haven't put the lines, but I'll finish up with the lines for you here. Gonna copy this. So copy and paste, reuse those arrows, reuse those shapes. Right? No need to always have to go click insert shapes and so forth. Just right click, hold, and move them, and the option to copy should pop up. So this is the first part. This covers up to line 15 of the code. Your task is to finish from line 17 to 26 for this flowchart, right? Make sure you copy this and paste it into your Word file once you get it to run, which I have. Just paste it anywhere. It could be at the end, it could be at the beginning, anywhere is fine. For those of you who are using folder sheet, see if you can get this to work on QBasic. You could actually type this out on your phone, on your web browser, and just to save on not sending me 2 pictures, because you could only send 1 picture at a time in the form, just send me a picture of the flowchart. If you can't fit this code in the folder sheet at the front with the flowchart, then by all means do that for me. But if you can't fit the flowchart on the front page, just take a picture of the flowchart for me, because again, with the form you could only upload 1 file at a time, and I don't want you guys to send me 2 submissions, because that's gonna get confusing when it's time to grade and check them. Alright, so if you don't have any more questions, I'm gonna assign the assignment form so that you can submit your work. And then I hope you guys understood what you need to do today. If not, just go ahead, rewatch the video. Alright. Alright, any more questions, guys, before I streaming? Are you guys able to see this, or is it just the video here that's not streaming? Well, anyways, that's pretty much the end of the class, so I'll end the stream. Not sure why